I talked to Dr. Anwar, he said he'd like for me to talk about the sort of the history of the telecommunications network and where we are now, and sort of a little bit of a look into the future. We're becoming, our company is essentially a telephone company, as well as being an internet service provider, and we do web hosting and website design, and really provide a whole suite of services, primarily to small and medium-sized businesses in what they call secondary markets. And one of our first markets that we offer service in is Amarillo. But I've been in the telephone business for quite a while, and I'll like about 15 minutes here to get an awful lot of information. And so I tried to kind of organize it in a way that might help you make a little bit of sense in it. So it sort of goes from Alexander Graham Bell to Monumental, as I said, for whom the bell tolls, because it's interesting to try to figure out today exactly what's going to happen in the telecommunications marketplace. Because from an e-commerce standpoint, we're talking about the infrastructure in which all of this is going to operate on. And the speed and efficiency and cost effectiveness of that infrastructure determines very much how viable all of these e-commerce business opportunities in fact are. First, I wanted to talk about what I'll call sort of the technology evolution. And I don't know if you've ever thought about it this way, but the initial national network was basically a telegraph network. It was built so that we could send Morse code along the railroad tracks and warn people of the impending Indian attack or whatever else may be going on at that time. But it's interesting to think about that, because that network is 100% digital messaging network. It was an analog at all, and it was all data. The big technology improvement after that was, sort of Watson, come here, I need you. All of a sudden we could have actual voice, and this was an analog transmission, and that sort of changed everything. Our whole perception of what you could do with an electronic network changed once we figured out we could actually have a conversation without being next to each other. We sort of lost what we were just talking about at lunch, that first-hand experience. Everything became, at that point, an auditory experience. We could talk and have a conversation. Switching, I said, is the next major sort of technological evolution, because what switching did was it allowed sort of everyone to talk to everyone. And what it also allowed was a much more efficient use of this network. It allowed for somebody else to use a telephone line between New York and Los Angeles when you weren't using it. And without switching, you don't really have that capability. And initially, the best analogy I can give you is like the network was like a private car. And when you own your car, when you're not using it, it's sitting safely in your parking space, if you're lucky enough to have one, or in your garage, but nobody else uses it. When switching came in the network, it was like, from a technological standpoint, from a traffic standpoint, it was like we all had a taxi cab. We used it, and when we weren't using it, somebody else was using it. And they could go virtually anywhere, and that's what switching allowed. Then networks themselves began to evolve actually behind the switching network. We begin to have lots of efficiencies and lots of ways then to connect information together once we aggregated it at essentially the first switching point. And we began to use, people began to send fax machines. Fax machines, to me, in my life's experience, one of the most fascinating technologies ever. We began to send images over the public switch network. I was the president of a company called Dayline of Longview in Longview, Texas, back in, starting in about 1985. Between 1985 and 1987, we had about, that company had about 4,000 or 5,000 small businesses as customers at that time. And between 1985 and 1987, we went from 5% of our customers having fax machines to 5% of our customers didn't. It was an incredible, I don't know if y'all remember, I mean, it used to be, you would go down to like the mailbox, et cetera, or something like that. They had a fax machine. You pay $2 a page to send a fax. I mean, it's just like, boom, overnight. Fax machines went from costing $10,000 to $300 or $400, and everyone had it. And it changed the way people saw what the network was all about. It was a huge thing. And now, the biggest thing that's impacting the way we see networks and the way they work and everything is wireless. And we're not actually seeing that in the U.S. like they're seeing it, say, in Europe. But there's a good reason for that. In the U.S., our wireline infrastructure is very good. In Europe and in the other world, the wireline infrastructure was very bad. Very bad. Very bad. And primarily because it was run by government agencies and the local post office in that country or whatever. So the infrastructure was really bad. So wireless really leapfrogged over the wireline facility as the way most people got a telephone in Europe. Therefore, the level of deployment of wireless technology and what you can do with it is actually quite a bit more advanced overseas than it is here. But our infrastructure, our telephone network is quite superior. So our wireless involvement is going a little bit slower because wireless has a lot stiffer competition here for dollars. The application sort of evolution on the network, it's interesting. It started off, as I said, all as data. It was Morse code. And then it became voice, which was analog. And then as facsimiles came on, we began to introduce image along with data and voice into the network. And then we began to overcome the limitation of the last mile with wireless technology. And now the network itself has become smart. And then the network itself begins to change and impact the data and the information that is in there. And that's what enables. We don't know when we do things, when we have the network and the applications work for us, we're not really sure where, and it doesn't really matter where information processing resides. All we care about is what happens in our particular interaction. And that's sort of the evolution of the application layer in the network. At the same time that all of that was going on, there's another big thing, huge thing, that impacts our infrastructure, and that's regulation. It all started out as an open market. There wasn't regulation initially, and I don't know if any of y'all have ever seen, if you've ever been to the phone company or worked with the phone company or any other pictures from back before 1934 in a lot of big cities that saw a picture of an office building with the window open and the entire window filled with cables coming in this window. Because there were multiple telephone companies in many towns, and you had to have service from all of the different telephone companies if you wanted to talk to everybody. And it was determined that that was actually not very efficient for the United States. And although Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone, a fellow by the name of Theodore Bell really invented the telephone company, which might have been even better invention. And that was, he's the one who went to the government and said, look, it makes sense that telephone be a national utility. That we just build one network, and we build one really good network, rather than all of this hodgepodge mess, which really doesn't work. And the government said, that's a good idea. And one of the things that would make that a good idea is if we let one company sort of provide service, we got to put a caveat on it, and you got to provide service everywhere. You got to give service to the folks in Mule Shoe. Because the fact of the matter is, the economics will never work for you to build a telephone network in Mule Shoe. So if I'm going to let you serve Los Angeles and New York and Houston and Dallas, you got to serve Mule Shoe, and that's where the concept of universal service came in. And it's been very important to the United States, and it's why we have service everywhere, and the service is so good. But having universal service creates in the economics of the network subsidies. The people in the city subsidize the cost of the people in the country. Urban subsidizes rural. The people in businesses who get much more value and utility out of the network subsidize the people at home. So commercial subsidizes residential service. People pay for local telephone service in Texas today telephone company, $12, $13, $14 a month for local telephone service. And even in an urban area, that doesn't recover the cost of that service. Go back just a few months, because things are changing so much right now, but back before Southwestern Bell was in the long distance business, you know, it cost a lot more to call a short distance, to call Plainview, for instance, than it would to call New York City. The reason for that is the subsidies. The telephone companies, through access charges, collected money so that they could subsidize both urban and consumer businesses. And the primary source of that subsidy was in long distance, and in particular in Texas, intrastate long distance. And so that's why people would ask the question, why does it cost more to call, you know, Fort Worth and Fort Knox? And that's because we charged more money for long distance to keep local exchange rates low. That was the principle. But you also have to understand that in a regulated monopoly, it creates the environment where the monopolist goes to the regulator to prove in his cost. Again, there is no, although regulation is intended as a substitute for competition, it doesn't really create the same kind of incentives and cost savings that competition does. So anyway, that's kind of how it evolved. Today, we have partial deregulation of that whole network. That deregulation really began in earnest at the end of the AT&T antitrust case, which produced what's generally called the MSJ, or the Modified Final Judgment. And that's what produced competition in long distance. And that's why UCI and Sprint, guys like me, used to call you all the time in home and buggy. And what made everything complicated. Because you used to have one service, you could call, get service, and now you had to make all these choices, and one distance company, one local company, and not everybody really liked that. However, when all of that started off, you paid a minimum of 3 minutes for every call that you made, and that minute cost you about 60 cents a minute. Today, you pay for tenths of minutes at a time, and it's costing you 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 cents a minute. And that's really where the market is at. And that's because of competition. The Communications Act of 1996 had as its goal to create that same kind of competition in the local exchange network. But there's some natty problems in that, and that is they still haven't figured out how to handle this universal service issue. And there are people with an awful lot of money and an awful lot of vested interest who intend to protect the status quo. And so the deregulation of the local network has taken place both in the marketplace and in the courts and in the regulatory world as well. And we're somewhere along continuing. At the same time that all the telephone things were evolving in the regulated world, in the free market world, computers evolved along a common way. Really, for purposes of my discussion, Thomas Watson and IBM really made computers a practical reality in all of our lives. They were invented early in this century, but IBM put them to use and put them into all of our lives. Now, one of the things that is true, and I'm going to divert from the facts and preach a little bit here, if you don't mind. I'm a free market person. I really don't like monopolies. I don't like government control, and I don't like monopolies. But so much of what I see people do in business is try to create ways where they can have control over some idea or things so that they can abuse the poor guy that's having to buy it. People don't like competition. Everybody's always trying to recreate a monopoly. I admire Bill Gates much more than I admire the phone company. Because the phone company had the government give them all their customers. At least Bill Gates went out and got all of his customers. Nobody gave him any. But he still had in mind that he would control the marketplace. Then he could determine what was good for us. You know? And I don't know whether the Justice Department is a little overzealous in attacking Bill Gates or not, but I can tell you that controlling the marketplace is not a good idea for all of us who need the marketplace to get goods and services for what we do. What we want is an open market with lots of competitors coming in that produces lower cost, innovation, and better service. And that is, I think, what we need. The Steve Jobs, interestingly enough, IBM, one of their ideas about networking computers and everything is we wouldn't have all this incompatibility problem because everybody would have to buy stuff from IBM, and you wouldn't have that, but you wouldn't have two different systems to interconnect, there would only be one system. Well, the problem with thinking like that is that everybody doesn't always agree with you that your system is in fact good, and therefore Steve Jobs essentially invented personal computing hardware, and Bill Gates invented personal computing software, and both of them would have been probably pretty happy to become very wealthy at the behest of IBM, but IBM wasn't interested in that, and so the world changed outside of IBM's control, and IBM didn't have to catch up, and they're still a strong, viable company, but they don't dominate the world like they once did, and there will be a time when Bill Gates will dominate the world like he does now, because there are two other things happening. The data networks initially started off, as I said, as telegraph, which is basically asynchronous, character at a time, data transmission. The real big innovation in that is synchronous transmission back when you go in, that's what really put computers on everybody's desk. But you didn't have a computer on everybody's desk, you had a great big computer off somewhere else. And you had access to that computer on your desk. And that was done through synchronous data networks, and they had these private line networks that went all over town or all over the nation. But they still had trouble interconnecting those networks with other networks, and they, as the proliferation of PCs happened, people wanted to connect PCs locally, and came technology called Internet and other LAN topologies, and out of that really began the proliferation of packet networks. I want to talk a little bit about packet networks, because remember the analogy about the car and the taxi cab? Well, now the taxi cab is a much more efficient use of a car. Everybody gets to use it. The packet networks are like mass transit. Everybody gets to use the transmission facility at once in packet networks, and they did that first locally, and that began to spread into the national network. And that's really what the internet is all about. So what they figured out was we could create a network where all the information was in these little packets, and those packets could go to anywhere we wanted to, as long as to whoever was connected to the network, as long as we agreed on a set of standards of how we would move these packets around. What was in the packets then would become up to the end user. And that's where packet networks came from. The network, the internet really isn't anything. It's a bunch of people have wires and stuff out there, but as far as hardware goes, what the internet really is a set of protocols that allow these packets to move around where everybody can use them, no matter what kind of computer or hardware you got. And that was a great idea, because it's changing the world and turning it upside down. Okay. So after all of this evolution, sort of what's the current environment? The current environment in the voice services marketplace is very chaotic right now. We can't figure out who the winners and losers are. If you want to know, kind of, if we know where we're going in that kind of field, you can watch CNBC or the capital markets, any place if you watch that. What they have figured out is routers are a good idea. You track Cisco stock over the last 4 or 5 years, you can figure out, we're sure routers are important. And we are sure that fiber optic cable is important. That's why Corning's stock has been going up of late. But if you look at service providers, we hadn't figured it out. You know, WorldCom stock was up, and now it's down. The Arbach stock didn't really move around. They got a big base, but they don't know what they're doing out. Sometimes the wireless guys go up, and then they come back down, and there's a lot of people not making any money. There's a lot of perverse things that have happened in the marketplace because venture capitalists gave people millions and millions of dollars, and they operated without making any money, and now we're sort of having an epiphany, self-realization that eventually we're going to run out of money. Somebody has to start selling this stuff for more than it costs, or we're not going to have a network. And so things are changing, and you're seeing a lot of things on Wall Street. So regulators, although they delude themselves into thinking that by making regulation they can determine who's going to spend money on what, regulators don't really decide that. Investment bankers, and investors, and the capital markets decide where the money's going to just as important, in fact, more important. But if you can't somehow make money at it, it's not going to be a good idea. So when we're looking at e-commerce and the telecommunications network, one of the things that's going to determine this is whether who's going to be successful is going to be the sort of a very old idea. I like what Vince Lombardi once said. He said, there are no new fundamentals. If you can't sell it for more than it costs to make it, it's not going to be a good business. Now, I understand Amazon.com is very innovative and everything like that, but at some point, they're going to have to sell books for more than they cost, or they're going to be out of business, and people are going to quit giving them money. On the other hand, eBay, Yahoo, America Online, and a number of other companies have started making a little money. And they're going to continue to make a little money, and there's going to be winners and losers. Just being in fact, being a .com has become a bad thing. A lot of companies have taken it off of their name because you can't get capital dollars now if you're calling yourself a .com. So this economic situation is going to drive very much what's going to end up fueling this e-commerce. So that if there's an underlying message to what I want to say in this is that there is no free lunch. And if we're going to have this wonderful new network, we're going to have to pay for it. And that we're going through a very difficult time, I think, right now, and but probably long-term very positive time when we're going to figure out what kind of business models actually work and which ones actually don't. One of the things that's interesting, and I've done enormous research on these statistics that you see here. I go to a lot of meetings, telecommunications associations and stuff like this, so I plagiarized all this from most speakers, so it's not very scientific. This is pretty common what people say. Near as we can figure, and I think this is fairly reliable, somewhere in 1998, more than half of the traffic in the total network in the U.S. became data. It used to be mostly voice, but now the traffic in the network itself is primarily data, more than 50% data. But the other thing that people don't talk about very much as everyone is out pursuing these new businesses is more than 80% of the money that's spent on network is spent on the voice side. So if you want to provide, be an infrastructure provider, you need to be, I think you need to be thinking about an integrated network that provides both voice and data. If you're looking to be a pure data application, ISPs have a very difficult time making money. I would say none of them do. It's a very difficult business to be in standalone, but you're really saying I'm going after more than 50% of the market that gets only 20% of the revenue. You have a fundamental business problem in developing a business model in that environment. So the fact of the matter is what's voice and what's data is those lines are, from a technology standpoint, are completely blurred at this time. You cannot tell the difference. Practically speaking, what's delivered out there, there's not a whole lot of voice, packetized voice out there, although behind the first layer of switching there's quite a bit, but at the user level there's not. But it's going to become that, in which case it's all going to become data. It's all going to be these little packets. And when it's that way, certain costs are going to come down, but other costs are going to be there, and it's going to change. So what I'm saying is we don't know. Everybody in my business who has a 5-year plan should save some of their effort, because we don't know what it's going to be like 5 years from now. We know it's going to be a lot different, and we know it's going to involve certain things, but we don't know what the winning technology is going to be. We don't know whether DSL, cable modem, wireless. We know some of the limitations with all of those technologies, but we really don't know what's going to win. And so it's going to be, there's going to be a lot of upheaval going forward in figuring out how to get from here to where we're ultimately going to be. And I can tell you, if you are doing any kind of startup and looking for capital dollars or thinking about doing an idea, if you're in this business, 2 years ago it was all the money you wanted. Today, it's very difficult. You better have a profit story or they're not going to talk to you. I have some ideas about this. Where to go from here? I think in the regulation standpoint, the two key factors, you can't impact the capital markets. The capital markets are impacted by whatever is a good investment. They're going to put those guys are absolutely single-minded. markets and rural markets and consumer and business is going to depend a lot on regulation. And here's what I think the regulators need to do. They need to focus on lowering the barriers. They need to be sure that there are opportunities for innovative people to get into the business, because that's where costs come down, that's where new ideas flourish. So it's very important to lower barriers to entry in any competitive market, in particular one that's been dominated and is currently dominated by someone who has market power. It's not right to say that the telephone companies are monopolies anymore, because they're not. There are other service providers, but when you have as much of the market as they do, they have market power. They have the ability to price below cost and drive the other competitors out of the business. That's market power. So that's why they can't be just blanketly deregulated. And like the capital markets, they're in it for the money as well. And they would be very happy for all the competitors to go away. Regulators need to not favor one business model over the other. What happens very often is they begin to look and decide that cable or DSL or digital wireless or something like that is the right technology, and they begin to write regulation around that, and they should not do that. They should let the scientific community and the business community figure out those problems, and the capital markets figure out those problems, and who they're going to give money to, who's got the best idea. If regulators try to decide which technology wins, they end up favoring certain business plans to the detriment of the marketplace in general, and that means consumers. And they have got to control the abuses of the incumbent monopolies. And if any of y'all are here with the telephone company, I used to work for the telephone company. They're some of the finest people in the world. They're really good folks, but let me tell you, when you got all the customers, you don't want to give any of them up. And that's just a fact of life. And so they have to be constrained in order for us to have a competitive marketplace that's going to deliver the benefits of competition to everyone. Universal service should not favor any particular constituency or competitor. In other words, we're not going to get rid of this idea of universal service. Our government is not going to allow there to be large segments of the population, rural or consumer independent, who aren't served by this. So there is going to exist some way to subsidize telecommunications infrastructure and mule-ship. But it needs not to favor a particular competitor. Anybody who wants to provide service in mule-ship ought to get the same level of support as anyone else to do that, so that they get the same benefit to do that. Competitors, and this is where I'm really going to preach, competitors need to figure out that customers don't care about technology. Customers don't care about how smart you are or how many patents you have or things that they only care about themselves just as well. And you need to care about them also. You need to figure out why it is anybody would want what it is you're selling. Then you need to figure out how to deliver it to them in a way that they can understand it and use it and benefit from it. And I think that we've lost that to a great degree, particularly because of the way the capital markets have funded business plans. But today, I think we're changing, and we're going to have a focus on whether or not people can actually sell this stuff to customers, and the business plan that are focused on who is actually going to use this and how they can do it. The other thing is that everybody in here, when you call a customer service number and hears this phrase, please hold, your call is very important to us, believes that. I hear to submit to you that recorded message is on its face a lie. Because if your call was that important, they'd answer the phone instead of deciding to play your music for a while you wait. And I think businesses need to wake up to the fact that customers want service. And the last thing I think is that businesses need to focus on making profits. Like I said, you've got to sell it for more than you're paying for it, or your business is not going to survive. You won't have the ability to do that. I have a few specific recommendations, and I'll be through. Did I talk too long? Okay. I think we need to continue to unbundle the local network, which means that if you switch service from the local telephone company to someone else, that does not create the need in the marketplace to build should be able to continue to buy switching and loops and stuff like that from the incumbent, which was basically paid for by the public in that. So we need to continue to make that available. And there are a number of things, I'm in detail, but there are a number of issues along that need to go on. We should open up the cable access. If it's a monopoly infrastructure out there, that anyone should be able to use it if the consumers were forced to pay for its deployment. And we should not allow the people that have market power to price things below the market and therefore distort the marketplace. Okay, thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you all very much. Where are we on, I guess the one thing worse than the inefficiency of regulated industry is the effect of it.
I own two companies. One's a hardware company and one's a software company. So I kind of see solutions in e-business from both levels, from both a hardware level, what it takes, what kind of infrastructure it takes to put that together, but also what kind of software that it takes to put this together. And my emphasis today is going to be on e-business. What is e-business? There's not really a definition. We're going to try to touch on some definitions today. But let's start with one definition of e-business, which is e-commerce. And that's pretty much the ability to buy and sell goods over the internet. And that's becoming more and more prevalent as we look across the country, that a brick and mortar store is going to have to make sure that they do have an online presence, because our society is getting very lazy as this technology moves faster. And eventually, if we're looking to buy, let's say, a shovel, just for, it's summer, we're going to go do a little gardening, we're going to be so lazy, we're going to go to Yahoo, Yellow Pages, we're going to look up the hardware stores in Amarillo, Texas, or wherever it might be, and we're actually going to shop for that shovel before we ever get in the car to go get it. So what a lot of brick and mortar stores need to look at is that they need to be on the internet, because in 5 years, if they're not going to be brick and mortars anymore. So that's very hard for brick and mortar stores to know, because I just did a show in New York City back in December, which was the National Retail Federation, which are all brick and mortar stores. And you would be amazed at what their solution is to the internet. Fight it as hard as you can. There's companies out there selling software packages for the internet that drive people to the brick and mortars, which is okay. But those companies that drive them to the brick and mortars don't sell the products over the internet. So you need to have a good balance of both of those, so that when somebody, let's say I'm a brick and mortar and my site is primarily designed to drive people to it, I want to make sure I can take that order if they don't decide to go that next step. And I think that's where a lot of the retail stores across the country are having a problem. And I definitely saw it at this show, because you tell them I've got some e-commerce software that will get you up on the internet. We don't want to be on the internet. And it's very scary how many small businesses think that way. And of course, that's changing. What is e-business? E-business is the use of internet technologies to bring together customers, business partners, suppliers, and employees. It's actually the ability to run your whole business over the internet from anywhere. And this is what we're all going to be going to, whether you're small mom and pop or whether you're a big Fortune 1000. You're going to need to run everything right now over the internet. There's two major components of e-business, and some of it relates with selling, some of it relates with customer relations, but I don't know if you've heard of a term called CRM, which is Customer Relationship Management. It's not a new term. We've been using it for years. It's just customer service. It's kind of a fancy way to say customer service. I've got a definition here that was very hard to find on the internet, because there was not one. I don't think that anybody could actually define what it is, but customer relationship management is a business strategy to select and manage customers to optimize long-term value. Okay? CRM requires a customer-centric business philosophy and culture processes. CRM applications can enable effective customer relationship management, provided that an enterprise has the right leadership strategy and culture. A lot of people don't even, is that really specific? What it comes down to is what CRM is, what we've done forever. Good customer relations. Somebody calls on the phone, following up good with them. And now it's even more difficult, because when you're trying to ask people to do business online, they can't see you. And how many websites have you been if there's no phone number? It's just a website. And people are still placing orders over that website. Of course, it's the people that have a lot of faith in the internet. But That's what one part has to be integrated. And a lot of small, older companies use older systems to keep that information. And until recently, those systems set separately. Let's go into ERP, which is Enterprise Resource Planning. And I'm going to tell you how both those function together. A business management strategy, it's a business management strategy that integrates all facets of the business, including planning, manufacturing, sales, and marketing. As the ERP mythology has become more popular, software applications have emerged to help businesses implement ERP. You know what an easy word for ERP is? Your accounting module, and a few other modules that help you integrate and interact with your customer. For years, though, you would have somebody would call into your helpline and they would be getting to your CRM. The lady would answer the phone, who are you, whatever. And 90% of the time, that database doesn't even interface with the ERP or accounting. So over the years, we've kind of gotten two monsters out there. We have what runs the business as the accounting, helps do the marketing, helps do the sales. Then you have another system that follows up on customer responses. But the problem is if you don't merge all those systems together, you're losing a lot of data because you don't know how many times this customer, because this customer may be in 10 different databases in your company. Now the future is to merge all those into one system. And it's almost vital that you do that. What you see is there's companies like PeopleSoft, SAP, are now getting into CRM, which is Customer Relationship Management. In the past, they've been in accounting functions that run huge organizations. So one of the things that we did at internetcommerce.com is we looked at this problem and noticed that there was a lot of people, smaller businesses, that could not even afford this kind of implementation, because we're talking, if you're doing an SAP installation, you're talking maybe 1.5 million to start and 20 million over 5 years. Well, a small business can't afford that, but a small business can't afford to get behind the technology. And what we did is we wrote a package. It's actually an accounting package with CRM and ERP built together. But what's nice is it runs everything on one database. When somebody calls into your help desk, you can look them up just because it's coming from the same customer database as the accountant. And everything's tied together. And that's what we've tried to do as a company to make it easier for people to get online. Predictions for internet e-business. If I could describe it in one word, unimaginable. The sky's the limit. There's no way that I can predict what's going to happen 6 months from now. And all we know is that we've got to be ready. We've got to be ready now. And yes, you may make some wrong decisions along the way. And some of the points I'm going to make in a minute, you probably will make some of the wrong decisions. But the key is right now you do need a presence out there, and you need to be taking orders over the internet right now. You can't wait 6 months, you can't wait 8 months, you can't wait a year. There are going to be standards come down, but you may have to evolve as those standards come across. But the key is right now, because who's in it now is who's going to be around 2 years from now, and not 5 years from now. Total worldwide e-commerce for 2003 was first predicted at $1 trillion by 2003. The revised estimates, $1 trillion by 2001. Looks like we're going to exceed that. The next estimate was $2.8 trillion by 2003, and then they came back 2 weeks later, so we were way wrong. We don't know what's going to be 2003, but we figured 2004 is $7.28 trillion. That amounts to a lot of commerce over the internet. And I don't care if you're mom and pop, you still need to be ready. And there's solutions out there, and I'll go over a few of those today. Solutions as low as $50 and as high as $1.5 million. And I've been involved in working from the $50 ones all the way to the $1 million ones. And the software we designed allows you to go up from any of those seamlessly, because they all use the same database. The $50 package uses the same database as the $1 million package, which allows a lot of expandability. Anyway, rules of the e-business. These are some of the rules that Ziff Davis said, which I don't know if you're familiar with. Ziff Davis are one of the largest publishers in the country. They publish PC Magazine, used to publish Computer Shopper until it went totally online. Number one, relationships matter. The most important e-business solutions help you improve your relationship with customers, suppliers, and employees. Eventually, what you're going to look at is your vendors are going to be able to come online and help you place orders with them. Or you're going to be able to go online and place orders with them seamlessly. The phone communication is going to cease to a large extent. Size matters. Big companies are going to be winners. We've seen that in Amazon.com, even though Amazon.com has no revenue model. I'll buy a book for $10, I'll sell it for 8. Boy, wish I could last a long time like that. Small companies in a niche can be survivors too, but most companies are in between. And it's hard. And that's why it's so important that you get an internet strategy right now. That's why it's very important that you come up with one now. And you're not going to come up with a perfect one. And there's several consultants out there. Some of them are going to be right, some are going to be wrong. But you're going to have to dive in and do it. Velocity matters. A quick solution is sometimes more important than the perfect solution, which is what I'm telling you here. You need to be on there tomorrow as opposed to waiting for the perfect solution, which may be 2 years from now. Because 2 years from now, 50% of America may be buying online and not coming in your brick and mortar. So velocity matters. You need to get a solution that works, even if it's a temporary solution. Integration matters. The ideal e-business solution to work for your whole business, not just one department. That kind of goes back to the software that I designed when I did my idea in mind, is that your same over-the-counter sales are in the same exact database as your web sales. And it's just as easy for me to look at page through invoices in New York City as it is for my retail store in Los Angeles to do it. And that's the power that you're going to see come out over the next five years. Actually, over the next 2 years. And you're going to be able to look at that data in unbelievable fashion. Technology matters. Existing systems matter, but they don't want to dictate your solution. In other words, if the best solutions are on an IBM and you're only a Mac shop, you might want to have to move to IBM or vice versa, if that's what it takes. So you need to not let what you've got now dictate what you do on the internet. The internet, it goes over many platforms. So as far as the front-end portion of your website, it's browsable by any type of browser. Partners matter. When choosing an e-business solution, you want a partner that's going to stick around and one that you can trust. Because you're in bed with them. And you're very much in bed with them. There's a little bit of things to look at when you're looking at that. One of the features of the software I developed last year is the fact that you don't need a webmaster. And I like to tell people that what's nice about it is if you have a webmaster, you're a web slave. You pretty much have to go to them every time you change something. My software has unlimited pages so that the person that we design a site for, once we finish designing the site, you're through with us. We turn over the site to you, and you add as many pages or as many products as possible. So when you're looking at a feature to build an e-commerce site, you want to look at that because most of these people charge $50 to $100 an hour. And if you might take a cheap solution, let's say that's a $500 solution, but every time you add a product, you pay him $100 more. And you may wind up that's a lot more of a solution than putting out maybe $3,500 to get the right solution that you control all the pages. So you need to look at that when you're looking at it because that's your partner. And the more control that partner will let you have of the site, the better off you're going to be. No matter what technology it is. Because I can give you some examples of where we do sites for some of the places, a lot of our clients are in New York City, but we have some here in Amarillo, that they would ask somebody to change an item. And I could give you a couple of examples, and they wanted to put an event on their webpage. Sure, no problem, we'll get the event up there. Well, 2 weeks after the event, there it is, right there on the front page. Because you're at their mercy to put that on there. And that's one of the things you need to look for when coming out with a solution. Uptime matters. You want something that's reliable because this is 24/7. I'm having this problem right now because I'm used to backing up my servers at 5 a.m. to 6 a.m. in the morning. However, 50% of my clients are in New York City area on the East Coast. Well, that's when they're getting up and starting to put things on their website. So I've moved it back to 3. Well, that's 1 o'clock California time. So my 2 customers in California are yelling at me because I'm taking their website down at 1 o'clock. And you have to kind of have a happy medium. But when you're looking for something for your own site, you want to make sure that you look at their uptime. Security matters. Make sure that you keep your information private. There's a new movement on the internet to keep your information private. In the old days, it was great. You could network and trade email addresses and trade addresses. Now it's looking at spam. So one of the most revolutionary marketing tools in the world, which is mass mail. You get the internet and you say, oh my gosh, this is even greater than mass mail because it's email. It doesn't cost me anything. I send as many as I want. Now they've got laws against spamming. So you've got to look at your security and also have a policy in place for that. Flexibility matters. You need to be able to listen to your suppliers, your customers, and react to them in times that you could only dream of before. In other words, solutions need to be made in minutes, not hours or days. So you need to make sure whatever solution that you implement on the net can be moved at that kind of speed. If you have a major problem, you put a product on special or something, and it's the wrong product or something, and you have a webmaster that has to change that. If it takes 5 days, how much business can you lose? Because people have hit your site, and you don't have, and there's a mistake. Bottom line matters. While retail businesses increase revenues, B2B business can reduce cost. Go for the maximum gain and the least amount of reduction. Basically, when you go into e-commerce too, bottom line matters. Go into it as a profit. You may first go into it as a loss leader, but your ultimate goal in an online strategy needs to be to make a profit. Or what you're going to see here is companies like Boo.com did a IPO last year and raised $120 million. Had the most unbelievable website. They were out of UK. You know what they sold their technology for that they developed for $120 million? $372,000. If you don't have a profit strategy, you're not going to be in business. So keep that in mind when you're going online, is that you need to have some kind of profit strategy, or what you're going to find out is you're going to be left behind. Every business, no matter how big and small, needs to have a web presence by 2000, really by the end of the year. It was almost imperative that they have it by the end of last year. Solutions. Currently, it takes different companies to come up with different solutions. Software developers like InternetCommerce.com, you've got Ariba, Commerce One, Broadvision, Alaris Cold Fusion are just some of the solutions that are out there that allow you to manage the site yourself. E-commerce integrators like InternetCommerce.com, Razorfish, and Agency. Razorfish and Agency are the two largest web developers in the United States, and you know what they both do? If you will not spend at least $1 million a year with them, we won't take you. One of them fired Sony because Sony would not listen to them about online internet strategies. Have you ever seen a business that you can fire your customer? And what's even more hilarious is that Sony came begging back. And they took them back and redesigned their site. Things that are unique to our solution, just kind of real quick, is that the fact that it allows you to implement it yourself. It's all database driven, so you can add unlimited products. And when somebody clicks on a product line, it will automatically generate from the database. But that's what our solution is. Several of these companies like Commerce One and Broadvision do the exact same thing, except for small business, their solution starts at $150,000 just to buy the software, and an average site designed with Broadvision is $1.2 million. An average site with Ariba is over $1 million. So it kind of puts a small business at a disadvantage. So you need to be careful when you're looking and find a solution that really works. Conclusion, your company needs to be ready. And if they can, they need to get everything that they can in one package so that you're not trying to run 3 different packages and then trying to coordinate them as a small business. First of all, small business doesn't have enough people to run as it is. They're usually shorthanded. And you don't have a lot of time to sit here and try to integrate 3 different modules to do 3 different things. But time is of the essence, and the only certainty is absolutely uncertainty. We have no clue where tomorrow's going to take us. I can sit up here and predict what personal computers are going to do over the next 5 years. I can predict over the next year what internet commerce is going to do. And I can only guarantee you one thing. I'm going to be 100% wrong, no matter what. So dive in and get ready. It'll be the most exciting trip of your life. Thank you very much.
I did have a presentation that I was going to put up on the high-dollar stuff, but I believe in technology, so I thought it'd work. So anyways, I will talk from notes rather than putting something up. Dr. Anwar asked me to talk a little bit today about some of the problems and issues that come from building and running e-business solutions. I want to give you a little bit of background of mine, just because it relates to some of the problems that we see today that people have. And they're things that have come from way back when. I've been in the software development industry for about 10 years, was with corporate systems for about 7 of those years. And back in the early to mid-'80s, the problems that have been pulled forward became readily apparent. A lot of those issues Lloyd touched on a little bit. and this kind of goes back to the insurance industry, but they'll have a underwriting system that houses the policy information, those types of things running on one system. They'll have their claims administration component running on a separate application, different operating platform, different databases, HR information, human resource information running on another platform again. Taking information and being able to consolidate it and utilize it within an organization was an issue back then. It's an issue today when you start looking at developing e-business solutions. Those kinds of things have just continued to get bigger and bigger as new systems come on and as you start to have the reach that the internet provides to do e-business solutions. One of the biggest problems I think today that companies start with in building an e-business application is a lack of total planning within an organization. When you look at e-business development, you've got to go back to the very foundation of your company and say, what is the real business reason that we're developing this application for? If you don't have a strategy that encompasses everything that you do, long term it will be a miserable failure. And we've seen that happen over and over again with companies building a site, thinking we'll put something out there, the world will be ours, money will flow, and it just does not happen that way. One of the key things that you need to ask early on is, who does this site service? Is it the external customer? Are you actually selling commerce products over it? Is it a business-to-business site where you're working with middlemen in the distribution channel? And how does it impact all of the people in that whole component of the business? If you don't know where you're going with the site and what you're trying to accomplish with it, just putting a site out there will not get you where you want to be. What impacts on the business is this going to have? And that goes beginning with systems. The impacts are going to be radical. If you look at it from the distribution side of things, how do you currently today sell your products to companies, and how do you fulfill the sales after they happen? That is going to change when you get into an e-business model. If you start looking at it to how does it scale within our environment? If you start out with a very small application on a small system, how is it going to scale through your organization as it grows? How do you have your servers, if you put it on NT to begin with, let's say, how does it grow out of that? How do you move into a Unix environment? Will the application allow you to do that? Will the database be supported across multiple platforms? A number of the systems types issues that you have to ask. How is it going to impact the personnel within your company? In looking at it today, you have an order come in, someone takes it over the phone. It's now going to come in over the internet connection. How does that information then get transported to your accounting department? Are you going to integrate that to the back office systems that support your accounting, that support your distribution components? How do you get it into the mail? How do you track it to know that it was mailed? How do you support that customer with your personnel? So it'll impact every part of the personnel in your organization. How does it impact your customer today? If your customers traditionally have been in a non-technical environment, let's say you're in the plumbing industry, maybe they have not evolved where they're using technology extensively. Are you going to still be able to service them correctly? Will they come to your site and buy it? Those are the kinds of issues with the customers that will be major. Another one that companies need to look at is how is it going to impact existing revenue streams. If you have a sales force today, it's a commissioned sales force that sells to territories, and you put an internet site up and people can come from anywhere to buy, what's that going to do to your sales within your current model that you have? All those kinds of things will be impacted, cause problems within the organization from a personnel standpoint. There are a number of issues around that side of the house that you must look at. In looking at it and looking at all of those components, I think it'll come down to a couple of keys. Do you build it yourself or do you outsource it? And when I say build it yourself, that would mean a number of components of that. The actual design and structure of the site. And in doing that, you're going to have to evaluate a lot of things that you do internally. Do Do you have IT personnel that understand development of those types of applications? What types of applications are you running today? Are you going to try to integrate it into your back office shops? If so, that's going to take a fairly experienced, fairly knowledgeable IT staff to do that. Do you have the resources internally to make that happen? If not, outsourcing may be an option for the design and building of it. From a systems expertise, do you currently today just run a small LAN internally? Are you going to look at thinking that you're going to host this application yourself? We're now talking a 24/7 application. It's got to be integrated into the systems that clear your transactions. The types of systems that you run will be web servers, which are significantly different than running your Microsoft Word product that you have today. So there are a lot of things that you've got to look at internally with the system side of the house and with software development side of the house to say, can we do it internally, or do we need to talk about outsourcing it? After you get the site created, where are you going to host it? Are you going to build the applications and servers that have redundancy to house it in-house? Lloyd mentioned that it needs to be a 24/7 application. What happens if you have one server that's your web server and it crashes? You're down. Do you build redundant systems? Can you afford to do that internally? And then if you do, can you afford to have redundant connections to an internet so that if one of the providers is down, that you have access through another provider to do that? Or do you look at outsourcing that to a company to host it? If you choose to outsource it to host, the company that you host with, you need to look at them very closely because the same issues that you would have, they will have. Are they multi-homed? Do they connect to multiple internet backbone providers? Do they have redundant systems so that if one of their servers is down, is your product still run across on another server so that you're not down? So you need to look very closely at those things when you talk about outsourcing in that type of a hosted environment. Our company has done a lot of development. We're an alliance business partner with Lloyd and Touche, and kind of comes full circle to the operational risk management industry. The marketplace that we're doing a majority of our work in today is European. And Dr. Anwar asked for us to address some of the issues that we see that are differences between what happens in the United States market versus what happens in the European marketplace. Basically, the Europeans in total are somewhat lagging in technology in a number of areas. In software, a number of releases behind what most of the companies in the United States are running. Typically, we're finding many of the big institutions will be still running Windows 95, Office 97, some of those kinds of products that do not support the very latest in security, that don't support the very latest in Java applets, some of the things that you need to support in developing applications that are e-business related. Software encryption has become a big issue. Just recently, the government decided that the United States government decided that they were going to relax some of the requirements for companies that are exporting encryption software into the marketplace to allow some of that to go into the European marketplace. But still today, when you're looking at e-business solutions, some of the very high-end data encryption pieces will not run in the European marketplace. It's not legal to export those with applications to those markets. So that's an issue. And then Richard mentioned earlier the telecom infrastructure. The wireline infrastructure is significantly behind what you see in the United States today. They are somewhat leaders in wireless, LMDS, and some of the high-end wireless broadband technologies are beginning to become better entrenched in the European marketplace than they are here due to that fact that there is not infrastructure to compete with them for wired technologies versus wireless. So the marketplaces are radically different. Will they get somewhat similar? Not for quite some time, I think. But the general pieces are that if you're looking to develop a solution that is e-business related, you need to start from ground zero and look at your organization in its entirety. How do we do business today? How do we sell to our customers? How do we service our customers? And then look at the model that you're talking about creating and say, how are we going to do it in this other environment? And how do they coexist for some period of time, potentially for a long period of time? You're not going to completely move away from everything you do today with an e-business solution to move to tomorrow. So you've got to see how they cohabitate together within your organization, and how do you support them? Probably the last and the biggest issue that we found in companies looking at building e-business solutions is that they fail to think about how do you market that solution. Today, the way you advertise, the way you do mailings, all of those kinds of things are geared around an organization that's not doing business in an online type environment. And companies make mistake after mistake, thinking we'll just put our site up and we'll have lots of business. That does not happen. You have to have a very good strategy with an advertising agency, whether it's in-house or out-of-house, to say, how now do we get the word out about this new way that we're doing business so that we drive people to that site? You're going to spend significant dollars building this product. You're going to need to spend significant time in planning and dollars to see how we market this product so that the word gets out. The proliferation of websites has created, I think, somewhat of a misconception in the customer's mind that search engines will drive business to your business. And early on, search engines were very good because the number of sites that were out there were somewhat limited. Search engines would repopulate themselves, would find sites, and typically you could, if you structured your site right, put the right wording, those kinds of things, meta tags within the product that you built, people would find you, the search engines would find you, and people would be able to get to you. You'd come up relatively high on their list. Today, there's no telling where you'll end up with a search engine with your name on that list. So you need to plan other things within your organization to get the word out to your customers or to potential customers to drive them to that site. And that's probably the biggest key, the biggest mistake that we've seen people make over and over and over is not planning how do you get the word out once you spend all the dollars to create that very wonderful site. Because it doesn't matter how good it looks, if people don't know how to get to it, you'll never sell anything from it, whether it's to the outside marketplace or whether it's a business-to-business site. You have to get the word out correctly to make it successful. That's basically all I have today. Are there questions?
Primarily what I do for my company, which I gave a little handout on BNS fact sheet. My division of NEC is called Business Network Solutions, and where I fit in with this is I function in marketing communications as a consultant to get the marketing message out and to get it out consistently. How many of you have ever even heard of NEC? Yeah, I guess because we're mostly computer people, right? We've kind of heard of them. The fourth largest manufacturer of chips, that type of thing, phones, computers. Well, you ever seen a commercial for NEC? No. How many of you have seen the NEC Invitational Golf Tournament? Well, there is one. You see what I'm saying? There's just not a lot of branding out there for NEC. Primarily what I do is I try to develop a message to get out to people, and especially for my division. NEC is kind of its own wholly design area, but primarily where I function as a practitioner's perspective is I've sat in on meetings where companies come to us and they want one of two things. They want money. Usually they want money for things like, say for instance, Lloyd's idea that he had with writing the software. I've seen agencies come to us before and say, hey, we have this really good idea. Can you help us out? And we fund it, or we don't, et cetera, et cetera. The other side of it I've seen is I've seen a lot of e-commerce sites come through our doors with new technologies. And kind of where I got thrown into the technology aspect of the marketing side of it was that I had to take technology, today's most current technology, no matter what that is, and I had to integrate it into our marketing initiatives. Well, gosh, that sounds simple, right? But the problem with that was that it's so in such cumbersome work for one person to do. So we have a staff. Well, when the e-commerce sites would come in, we would sit in a room, we would discuss new things. Some really neat things I saw happen throughout this. I've had chances to work with the CEO of NEC, the CEO of my company, in these meetings. And there was a time when, I don't know, you've seen streaming video over the net. That's big hot stuff right now. Voice over internet protocol. There was a company that came to us, and I've been advised I can't say the name, but they came to us and they said, we would really like to have some money to go fund this thing. And my CEO asked them, well, how much are you looking for? Just point blank. How much money do you want? Well, around $8,000 to get it going. And my CEO just looked at it. Usually we deal with, our site, our website, NEC America, was $1.5 million to build the site. Okay? Phenomenal. I'm sitting there, I'm from West Texas, okay? That's a lot of money. But these guys want $8,000. My CEO writes the check out of his own personal account. I'll fund it for you. I'm not going to use company money, but I'll fund it for you. Neat things like this. So what I did is I put together these little strategies and tips and hints of, e-commerce is out there. We see it. We live in it. We choke with it sometimes when you're backing up servers on 3 different coasts, right? North, south, you're in some other area. You're thinking, what's going on in Asia today? That type of thing. I put together these hints and tips on how can I get beyond E. It's no more, it's no more e-commerce. We got to think about what strategies can I use to get beyond E. And that's kind of where I'm going. And I've got an outline in here. I don't get to share my toys with you. I've got a reason I wanted to do a toy thing. I've got a trade show I'm going to in California. I'm leaving today for this weekend, and I've got this new toy that I think some of you guys that were students saw. I was testing a beta version of it then. Now I'm integrating it into the trade show. I wanted to share that, but be that as it may. Little outline. We'll talk about these strategies. Won't take up too much of your time. Then we'll get on to the break. Competing in the new economy, the new rules. Well, what do I do? How do I move beyond E? E-commerce is no longer unique on its own. How many of you would agree with that? Yeah, we've heard it. The rhetoric. My brethren up here, we're saying it to you. We're saying it's no longer the same. It's changing. It's evolving. As fast as we say things that are new, things are changing. So, at any rate, e-commerce, no longer enough to sell e-business as a be-all, end-all solution for your clients. You kind of got to go beyond that, don't you? Well, think about this. Web solutions should be a part of an overall business strategy. What do I mean by that? Well, can I just, and I heard one of the guys mention it, and I was thinking of this too. PC Shopper, I think it was Lloyd. They went all totally online. And when that happened, did you kind of go, whoa. PC Shopper, man, that's where you grow up cutting your teeth, learning about computers on PC Shopper manuals, right? And then go all the way to online. Well, is this a good move? Who knows? But you got to take this thing and integrate it into a business strategy. Well, what does that mean? Direct mail, point-of-sale systems, and believe it or not, my friends, human contact. Does it seem funny to you? We've gone from human contact where I come up to Kyle. Kyle, how you doing, buddy? Good to see you. Glad to see you in the store. We go away from that onto the website, and now we're right back to it. How many of you have seen the new sites out there where you click an icon and you're talking with someone? What do you think they're working towards? Yeah, I see it all the time. They're getting back to what was once working, what was good. It's all about relationships, that type of thing. And I think that's the rhetoric that everyone's kind of giving. This number 4, the slide, that was really going to be fun because Mark Solis was here. And Dr. Anwar and I talked a lot about this. Avoid CIOs? Question mark. Well, the funny thing about that is the Chief Information Officer is no longer the only person out there that you should be targeting to get information from or to provide solutions or to pitch an idea. And the reason for that is the old school CIOs were technical people. How many times, and I've seen it, you go to a meeting, these companies would come and want funding, they sit us down, there'd be 15 people in the room, and the CIO's there, and they say, well, we'd like to do this with your company. First thing the CIO says is, what's that going to do to my network? Then they start talking about technical. Marketing doesn't match up with the technology. It just doesn't match because I'm concerned as a CIO, what's this thing going to do? What's this video going to do to my servers? Is it going to crash it? It's hard to sell those ideas. I told you my CEO wrote the check out of his personal account for these guys in Dallas. It was a Dallas startup. The CEO was in on that meeting. What does that tell you? Get somebody else involved in that meeting. Get as many people as you can involved in that meeting. Upper level managers as well. Marketing managers, really good. The ideas people, right? They're the ones that they want to take this idea and run with it. And we don't, I had a neat conversation at lunch too. We don't think as marketing managers say, oh yeah, that'd be cool. We'll just click here and we'll drag it here and we'll do this. We're not thinking in our mind all of the technicalities of database management. How many programmers is it going to take to make this happen? This type of thing. So that's kind of a neat thing. Avoiding CIO as well. Don't alienate the CIO. It's very important that you have them. Don't get me wrong. And that's kind of what I was punning Mark about earlier. But don't just target the CIO. Well, number 5, don't go cheap. I see this happen all the time. I'll give you an example of a company that did this, and I don't know if I can mention, but CompUSA in Dallas. When I first moved to Dallas, I worked as a technology instructor. They went real cheap. They would hire cheap people for a lot of their initiatives. What happened to CompUSA? You kind of see what happened. They kind of collapsed there for a while. IT professionals are in high demand. If you don't pay top dollar for your people, your competitor will. Plain and simple. Have a friend that just graduated from the University of North Texas with a degree in computers. He's working for IBM Global Services. His minimum starting salary was $65,000. He's younger than I am. $65,000. That's, to me, it's a lot of money. Some people might be no big deal. I've only been out here, in the working world a couple of years now, so to me that's just, wow, that's nice. At any rate, it took a while to get here to where I am. And if it wasn't for technology, I guarantee you, a marketing guy out there in the world right now isn't going to command that amount of money. You got to mix it in with technology. And when I do these lectures for classes, I keep telling these guys, know the technology. Learn something about technology. So at any rate, build a strong company culture where while remembering to compensate staff as well with salary and benefits. E-Tensity, which is a company that they're a kind of a solutions provider. They give a $400 a month car allowance to their employees that have been there over a year. It's pretty nice. I get stock options. I wrote a program in Visual Basic for my marketing field. I have 1,100 people out in the field. I wrote a Visual Basic program that makes a scope of work document automated, so they weren't having to click down through the the menu. I took that stuff that I learned from technology and kind of like Lloyd was talking about, write the stuff. Take some initiative. I didn't know Visual Basic. I kind of know a little bit about it now. Not as much as I should probably, but what I'm saying is you take that initiative. Well, the way I'm rewarded for taking that initiative is I get to keep my job. I get to live in the wonderful place of Amarillo. I telecommute back and forth between Dallas, and I get stock options. That's nice. That's a nice little thing you get in the mail, that kind of thing. So it's kind of fun. So reward your people. Money saved today is worth nothing tomorrow. You've lost all your market share. I think that's one of the cool things that I've heard come out of the meeting that we've seen. Well, number 6, a lot of people may or may not like this, but ditch your .coms. The .com revolution is over. What? You're telling me my friends just said, jump on the .com bandwagon, the bandwagon. Well, as we know it, it's over. We're kind of in this new wave. And I think this we've seen today. We're moving towards that e-enterprise type initiative as opposed to the e-commerce. So just keep that in mind. If you don't, you never know what's going to happen. Well, at least as we once knew it. And what I mean by this again, this morning I picked up the Dallas Morning News on the business section at the bottom. It was .com this, lost 55 million. .com that, lost this, lost that. 2 years ago, I sat in classes while I was videotaping this seminar, right? I sat in classes and I listened to my professor say, there's a problem out there. The PE ratios of these stocks just don't match up. Something's going on. Well, now what do we see 2 years later? They're falling apart. So you have weak financials, you have increasing competitive pressures. Well, we see that, don't we? Investor flight. That's a big deal. A real big deal. And what that does is people that come to my company now and they want money, it makes people think twice now, kind of before they jump into it. So I would challenge you to kind of think twice about some of them as well. For you guys that are solution providers, maybe somebody's coming to you wanting to put this presence out there. You kind of have a choice, and I think Lloyd kind of hit on this. You can kind of qualify your client a little better. It's like when Sony got turned down and then came crawling back. Well, it's kind of true. If you pick a good client, someone that's going to be out there and do a good job, then that makes you look better in the end. So I guess what I'm saying is, don't just jump at the first people that come to the door. Kind of take time and qualify. What's this, modified internal rate of return going to be for them? What's that going to do for me in the end? This type of thing. Seek out a few .coms that want their e-business sites fully integrated with offline channels. And this simply goes back to the same thing of going beyond in this web solutions. If I'm a solutions provider and I'm hosting, say, not a host, who's somebody in a business, I don't want to just put that presence out there. I want to tie this presence in with strategies on the outside, direct mailings, this type of thing, tracking where my client base hits are coming from, marketing to that area, these type of things. So that's kind of a good idea. Choose partners carefully. I saw this one day. I sat in on a panel meeting. A friend of mine that works for Cisco was there. His name is Fritz. And we were trying to decide on, as a company, who we were going to strategically align with. We went with Cisco. We're now like one of the largest Cisco resellers in America, probably in the world now, because we've got offshore channels as well. But the thing about it is we had to decide who's the front runner. And it wasn't that we just went out and looked at market cap and said, oh, I think Cisco might be pretty good. But I think you guys said earlier, somebody decided, hey, routers are pretty important, right? Well, Cisco's a real good solid. And what I would tell you is if you're forming strategic alliances, joint ventures, this type of thing, pick your partner carefully. Know that partner. I think you've heard that today as well. Stick to platforms you know well. Probably wasn't the best idea for me as a personal individual to go off and write a Visual Basic program to automate a document when I'd only taught Visual Basic on a lower level a couple, 3 times. But I did it anyway. Now I've kind of challenged myself to learn more about it. So stick to things you know well, but that doesn't mean you don't have to venture out and kind of test the waters a little bit as well. Of course, here we go. Focus on 1 or 2 technologies your competitors are not leveraging. This company, Valair, came to us, and they had they had this nice new technology for 3D renderings and audio, visual, this type of thing. And we took this and we broke it down, and what they wanted to do was let us fund this thing, but if we were to use it on our internal servers, we had to buy their little special application to make it run. No, sorry, that didn't work, because we didn't want to be a slave to their particular application that they had out there. So kind of keep that in mind. But you can, if you find something that other people are not leveraging, you can use it to get a better, kind of a better overall market perspective, or even a nice little niche game. Well, business to business may be a great marketplace. Oh yeah, I think so. You've heard this today as well. I got a little stat on here that I pulled from the Yankee Group in Boston, and the only reason I did that is the Yankee Group is real funny. I sat in on a meeting, first time I'd ever been to Boston, and one of the guys that was there was about my age, and we just hit it off, and he worked with Yankee Group, and so I used his stat. At any rate, $3 trillion in business-to-business transactions by 2004. This amazes me as well. 850 billion of that will be generated by e-market transactions. And this is predictions again. They're not going to be accurate, but they'll be close. Everyone has a different perspective. I like Mike's from the Yankee Group. Dominate, don't duplicate. Choose your clients carefully. I think we talked a little bit about that already. But look for projects that will define the future of e-business. I'm lucky because I am from a big company. People come to us with this new technology. We have the money to give. Doesn't mean we always do it, but we see some of the coolest and newest technologies out there. And the neat thing about it is we try to look at those and we try to lay those out on a scale and see which one in the end would be the best overall to be funded. So there's different models for that as well. Well, defining the future of e-business, I'd like to be on the cusp of what's going to be. I'd like to be doing something cool in the future, have a part in that. If you're a solution provider, if you're trying to get people to do their websites, you might want to think about that. If they have an idea, don't just throw that idea away. Try to take that idea and work with it. And see if you can't mold it into something that'll be better and beneficial, and maybe even a new direction. Broadcast.com, Mark Cuban. Anybody heard of Mark Cuban? He started this little company called Broadcast.com. Now he owns like everything in Dallas. You can't go anywhere without Mark Cuban being there. You know, I've sat through meetings with him. I've met him. Coolest guy around. I mean, he's just a real laid back. Hey, how's it going? You know, but the guy's just, although he hired Dennis Rodman, I don't know what was going on with that. But he likes to work with marketing and media, so, well, if you really want to do the same thing 500 times, and this kind of goes back to this on the cusp of things, I think probably primarily one of the reasons I wanted to go out and learn a new software package was because I didn't want to be stuck doing the same thing. You know, I use all kinds of different graphics packages to generate collateral and do advertisements and all this fun thing. I gotta tell you, you get bored. You know, you get bored of doing the same thing over and over, so I found something different. Requirements. In other words, I'm going to have to go out and hire, 15 database programmers to make this thing happen. Is it worth my time and ink? It all goes back to internal rate of return. What am I going to get back out of the funding of the initiative? Well, significant business partners, do you think it makes sense for NEC to want to form a strategic alliance with Cisco? Why, sure. You think Cisco really gets anything out of it? Well, maybe, because they get somebody that sells their stuff, right? Well, we also have strategic alliances with Sprint. The reason I carry a Sprint phone is because my company has a strategic alliance with them. You know, I get Southwestern Bell phone calls, and they say, well, would you like to buy our services? And I say, well, I can't because I'm in this strategic alliance. But the reason we went with Sprint is because of the depth that they're developing in their networks. It's going to wireless. We want to take advantage of that. So form those strategic partners carefully, very carefully. Think global. How many times have you heard that? All through my college career, I listen to this guy right here say, think global. Do you want to work for Taco Bell the rest of your life? Think global. That type of thing. And part of it, the reasoning was, is that he instilled in me to go out and try to find something better. I went to Dallas. My wife was working on a PhD. I go to Dallas. I don't know what's in store for me. I teach technology. I end up at NEC. And now I work for Amarillo for NEC. Just kind of know. Go beyond. See what's out there. You know, that kind of thing. Get tired of me saying that kind of thing. I used to do that. You know, this time of the day, it's always the afternoon blahs. When I teach, people, cell phones would ring or whatever, and maybe I'd wake them up. But the afternoon blahs, you just have that big meal. And by the way, that was a good meal. You have that meal and you're tired. Think global. The couple of neat little stats I pulled from International Data Corp. Don't really know anyone there. Just got these off of a website. The U.S. portion of web users worldwide will decline from 43% in 99 to 33% in 2003. Well, we're getting better with our web proliferation, but the users are starting to decline. That's a signal. We kind of got to look to other markets. The U.S. portion of internet commerce revenue will decline from 61% of the total $130.5 billion in 99 to less than half, 44% in 2003. Another signal. And I guess, as a consultant, it's fun because you get to throw out all these signals. And then if you're wrong, you get to come back later and you get paid again to tell them why you're wrong, right? That kind of thing. But be that as it may, build globally sooner. Outside internet usage explosion is going on. Asia Pacific region, Western Europe. You heard Kent talk about Europe and how they're behind us in a few things, but they're also ahead of us in some other things. There's a lot of developmental processes that are going on right now over there that's really going to put them in a position to utilize this type of technology in probably the next couple of 3 years. Probably within that frame, somewhere in there. And this is the biggest one that I think I've seen. A foot in the door doesn't mean an invitation to come in. If a prospective client doesn't want you or to let you in as a strategic player, then find someone who will. And it's just as simple as, a lot of times I've seen people come to us, want money. We didn't fund it. They go right back out, they find somebody, and it's very successful. So, they came in, they met with everybody, one-on-one, hey, that was great, how's it going, that kind of thing. As soon as they leave, we're like, no, we're not doing that. That kind of thing. You see what goes on behind the doors. So there will always be somebody out there. You just got to keep beating down the doors. As an e-builder, you're only as good as the solutions you create. I think that's very important. I think it's so important. Your reputation is only as good as what you've got out there right now. If you have something, I've heard it earlier today, somebody's happy, think Dr. Long said. Somebody's happy, they go tell a couple, 3 people. Somebody's unhappy, they tell 10 times more. Keep people happy, build that reputation. It'll really do a good job. Build your own expertise to provide complete solutions. I even though I'm an employee of NEC, I kind of look at myself as my own business. And I got to constantly be finding ways to increase my market value. And the way I do that is that little statement right there. I build my own expertise to provide complete solutions. Somebody in my company comes to me with a problem, I'm going to find a way to make it happen. I'm not going to let them know what the way is. There's what is the old saying? There's margin in mystery, that type of thing. So, but I'm going to try to find a solution. And if I can't, I know people that will. Catch the next wave. It's not too late to be a successful e-solutions provider. Today's customers want to go beyond a fancy website. They want a web technology solution that will, number one, improve customer satisfaction. You know, that's a lot of the reason we see these point and push. You know, if you're a certain level of customer, I got to back up a minute. If you spend a certain amount of money with, say, Hewlett Packard, you get the button on your website to talk to somebody. I think it's like $50,000 or something like that. But if you're not, then you don't. But what they've done is they've classified. They've already started to break up and look at their customers that are coming out through web mining. They know who it is when they go on the site. If you are spending $50,000 a month with them, you get the button to talk to somebody, this type of thing. Well, that in the end just improves customer satisfaction. Open up new sales opportunities. Again, it goes back to just knocking down doors, trying to find out what's going on. When I came back to Amarillo, my wife got a job with Region 16, a really good job that, you know, that is in technology, of course. And she came to me, she said, got this great opportunity in Amarillo. We're from Amarillo. But I know you've got your career too. And I was like, well, you know, I don't know what I'm going to do. I came to Amarillo before I even gave my notice with NEC, started knocking down doors. And I said, hey, I don't know who you are. Let me introduce myself. This is what I do for your company. And I laid out a portfolio. I said, let me help you. Well, come to find out, I got lucky. My CEO came to me and said, nah, we'll work something out. And so I get to tell you. But I met a lot of neat people in Amarillo just by going and knocking down doors. And in a way, I was opening up opportunities for myself. Well, drive efficiencies. No matter what you do in life or in anything else, there's always a better way to do it. You know, the more I've looked at software, the more I've looked at the internet, the more I've looked at all this stuff, the less I know about it. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing I can give you today. You know, if you're trying to provide a solution, there's always going to be so much more stuff out there that you can take advantage of to create these efficiencies. If you can get the job done 10 times faster, you have an advantage, a competitive advantage over someone else. And that's kind of a neat way to leverage yourself as well. And the last thing is, I've noticed that, you ever notice you get in those executive meetings and they always want to put a business model on everything, right? Well, there's certain standard business models. Then there's this new paradigm of business models that exist out here, which we are in. E-commerce, web commerce, technology. It's funny to me, if you go back and you look at how hypertext markup language, HTML, works in the beginnings, it's not like reading a book from A to B. You know, it doesn't go page 1, page 2, page 3. It goes from 1 to 100, back to 10. How can you take something that's designed and developed on top of that and put a static business model on it? I think there's always going to be some kind of dynamics built in your business model. I didn't include that in there, but I was thinking about that earlier today. On my way down here, I was thinking that there's so much dynamics that are in this. You've got to incorporate that in one way or another. And other than that, do we have a question? Anything I could answer? Got you through the afternoon belongs. Yes.
We got a projector for you. You want to show off your software?
Oh, I don't think we have time now. Maybe next time. I'll show it at the end of the time. But thanks anyway.